kunja-vihari jaya kunja-vihari jaya radha madhava kunja-vihari madhava kunja-vihari Gopijana Vallabha Giri-taṭeṣu Gopijana Vallabha Giri-taṭeṣu Gopijana Vallabha Giri-taṭeṣu Jasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Jasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Jamuna Tira Vana-caro Jamuna-tira vana-caro Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja-vihari Kunja-vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja-vihari Madhava Kunja-vihari Gopijana Vallabha Giri-taṭeṣu Gopijana Vallabha Giri-taṭeṣu Giri-taṭeṣu Jasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Jasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Jamuna-tira vana-caro Jamuna-tira vana-caro Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja-vihari Madhava Kunja-vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja-vihari Jayom Viṣṇuṁ Paramahamsa Hariya Astattarasatasi Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Gaura Premanandi Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Here's some good news. This morning we're going to complete the section on Canto 10, Chapter 35, verses 8 through 11. And then we're going to begin the next two verses, 12 and 13. The reference this morning is Sanatana Goswami's Brihat Bhagavatamrita, where he directly quotes this verse from this chapter, Krishna's flute song, and makes his commentary. Translation: the charming flute song steals away the minds of the cranes, swans, and other lake-dwelling birds. Indeed, they approach Kṛṣṇa, close their eyes, and, maintaining strict silence, worship him by fixing their consciousness upon him in deep meditation. Commentary. This is another verse sung by the Gopīs, who were trying to console one another during the daytime when Kṛṣṇa was absent. The birds of Vraja are superior to the bugs and insects, but even among the birds there are different levels of Kṛṣṇa consciousness. The waterfowl are a little less fortunate than the others because they have less opportunity to be close to Kṛṣṇa. The waterfowl described in this verse, that's 10:35:11, live in a faraway lake filled with clean water, clusters of lotuses, and various other attractions. Innumerable cranes, swans, and other birds forever sport in that lake. But when they hear the beautiful song of Kṛṣṇa's flute, their minds are captivated. First, they become bewildered and fly about madly in all directions. Then, they return to the lake and settle down to engage in serious worship of Lord Hari. To fix their attention exclusively on him, they restrain their minds, bodies, and speech. They subdue their minds, close their eyes, and resort to complete silence, bringing not only mind, sight, and speech, but all their senses under strict control. Or, understanding the word upasate to mean they approached rather than they worshipped, the birds leave the lake to come near Kṛṣṇa and sit by his side. Being close to Kṛṣṇa gives them the highest pleasure, as shown by the way they become peaceful, closing their eyes and staying silent. Paragraph. The word hanta in this verse indicates joy and surprise. But it can also be taken to express disappointment. And accordingly, the whole statement of the verse can be understood in a different way. The birds approached Kṛṣṇa and apparently calmed down, but were their minds actually peaceful? Not at all. Taking the liberty of adding the negative prefix a to the words mīlita and dhṛta-maunāḥ, we can read, quote, the birds could not control their minds, yata-cittā, could not close their eyes, mīlita-dṛśo, and could not be silent, dhṛta-maunāḥ. Their meditation on Kṛṣṇa caused such ecstatic mental transformations that they couldn't possibly keep their minds calm. They were in such anxiety from being able to see Kṛṣṇa that they couldn't close their eyes, which even lost the natural ability to blink. And They took to such loud sankirtan of Krishna's names that any trace of sobriety was out of the question. Sanatana Goswami. Paragraph. Or, understanding the bird's condition in another way, as a result of worshipping Krishna by meditating upon him, they attained the ecstasy of murcha, loss of consciousness, their minds dissolving into oblivion. They simply closed their eyes and fell silent. In other words, the gopi speaking implies, although these birds are members of a different species of life, although they live in the sky, although they are males, and although they live in a distant lake where they are busy enjoying in various ways, the song of Krishna's flute has forcibly dragged them to Krishna's association. Concentrating their minds on Krishna has awakened in the birds a transcendental prema that has destroyed their natural peace and thoughtfulness, disturbed their consciousness with all sorts of agitation, and rendered them completely bewildered. What can be said then of the constant state of the gopis, who have no other purpose in life than to serve Krishna? They too must be suffering, but much more severely. That's the end of that cluster of verses, 8 through 11. So now it's 12 and 13. New topic. O goddesses of Vraja. So this is gopis speaking to other gopis, either one gopi or several gopis, pacifying one another by remembrance of Krishna. O goddesses of Vraja. When Krishna is enjoying himself with Balaram on the mountain slopes, playfully wearing a flower garland on the top of his head, he engladdens all with the resonant vibrations of his flute. He thus delights the entire world. At that time, the nearby cloud, afraid of offending a great personality, thunders very gently in accompaniment. The cloud showers flowers onto his dear friend Krishna and shades him from the sun like an umbrella. There's no BBT purport, but here's Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writing. Having described the joy from hearing the flute of the conscious and unconscious entities of the earth, the gopis now describe the bliss of the unconscious entities in the sky. When Krishna, brilliant with garlands on his head and chest and ornaments on his ears, accompanied by a troop of cowherd boys, Saha Balaha, situated himself on the side of a hill and, blissful at the sound of his own flute, began to taste that sound in order to fill the universe with that bliss. The clouds in the sky began to rumble gently so that the sound would not disrupt the great cloud of Krishna. The thundering of the clouds was favorable to the flute sound, not disturbing in any way. The cloud was a friend of Krishna, being similar with a dark color and function, namely, taking away the distress of the people of the world. The cloud began to sprinkle fine rain like tiny flowers, and, in order to give shelter from the heat of the sun, made an umbrella from its own shade. Pratapatra in this verse means that which delivers one, trayate, from intense heat, pra-tapa. Paragraph. On the form of the cloud called Kṛṣṇa were his garland, and earrings like flying cranes, and his yellow dhoti like lightning. The song of the flute was a shower of nectar. Jiva Goswami writes, in the afternoon, decorated with special colorful garlands and dress, he wanders on plateaus of a mountain devoid of shade, because the cows wander there. Desiring the shadow of clouds, he sings the Malara Raga along with Balaram and other friends. By making echoes of the song on the mountain plateau, he makes the universe echo the song. By his will, with little effort, he makes the clouds come, and by the rumbling sound of the clouds he becomes joyful and makes the universe rejoice. As devatas hidden by the clouds shower flowers, he plays in the shadow of the clouds. The Gopīs, with a vision of this pastime, speak. Paragraph. What to speak of all the individuals mentioned and all others, the whole universe becomes blissful. Though the clouds are unconscious, far away, and movable by nature, they describe them, the Gopīs describe them, imagining that the clouds are friends with Kṛṣṇa, friends because of form, color, and activity. He is with Balaram. But this statement indicates he is accompanied by Balaram and other friends. He is pleasing with his garland and flower crown. He goes to the flat areas on the mountains, mainly Govardhan. The plateaus are praiseworthy because they give pleasure. This is indicated by the root meaning of the word sanu, plateau, meaning to give. Govardhan also is praised since it is the support for the earth, Kshiti Brit. O women of Vraja, Vraja Devayaha, you are endowed with special charm, Devya, among all the residents of Vraja, who are endowed with fortune, desired by the most exalted devatas. This indicates the superior intelligence of the Gopīs. Therefore, you can understand the nature of the flute song. When Kṛṣṇa, his associates, and the universe become joyful, the cloud also desires to rumble loudly in joy, but becomes worried of committing offense by overpowering the sound of the flute with his rumbling, as if trying to surpass Kṛṣṇa, who is the greatest. He thus rumbles very softly to nourish the song of the flute. Thinking that Kṛṣṇa is tired, he tries to please Kṛṣṇa. The cloud showers flowers on Kṛṣṇa, who is his friend because of being the same color. Anucaraiḥ is in the present tense, indicating that the cloud continually rumbles. Vavṛṣuḥ is in the past tense, which indicates an act of friendship, which was fixed. He makes an umbrella by the shade of his cloud form. Paragraph. The garland is made of cut petals of differently colored flowers made into finer and finer strings. He is charming with garlands, head ornaments, and ear ornaments. His head ornament is made charming by his garland. He gives joy, upa-rambhati, to the universe. Paragraph. The cloud showered flowers gently. Summa no bihi can also mean that he showered Kṛṣṇa with splendid mentality. The cloud serves in three ways. 1, by giving shade with his body. 2, by rumbling gently with his voice. And 3, by his pleasing mentality. Sanatana Goswami writes, at noon on top of the plateau, he gives up his previous dress and dons a dress with many colorful garlands. He joyfully plays his flute and gives joy to the world. Understanding that the sound is superior to his own rumbling, a joyful cloud serves him as a friend, thinking of serving the whole world. 2 verses describe this. Paragraph. To make the sound spread throughout the universe, he plays his flute with Balaram, Saha, Balaha. He plays his flute with some strength. He has a garland on his head as play, or the garland on his head is beautiful. This is a cause of joy. He gives joy on plateaus of Govardhan, which protects or nourishes the earth. The joy protects or nourishes the earth. Shiti Britaha. Or he is situated on plateaus of various mountains nearby. The plural is used to indicate that the sound of the flute echoes on various plateaus. The sound on the plateaus also nourishes the earth. Shiti Britaha. Paragraph. O women most worthy of worship in Vraja, or O women dear to Kṛṣṇa, the Lord of Vraja, the sound is actually for you. Or, O women inclined to play in Vraja, you are deprived of these various pastimes. He gives joy to the world because he manifests special joy. Jata Harshaha. The cloud desires to rumble loudly in joy also, but worries about surpassing Kṛṣṇa since the cloud is above him. With his sound, the cloud will drown out the sound of the flute and create offense. The cloud thinks of giving comfort to him. He thinks of Kṛṣṇa as a friend, since he is the same color, or thinks of Kṛṣṇa as having a good heart in spite of his offense, means the cloud's offense. By giving joy to the world, he is our friend, giving unmotivated benefit. Therefore, the cloud showered flowers everywhere. Paragraph. He has charm with his earrings and garland. Situated on plateaus, he gives joy to Govardhan. The cloud rumbles softly, as if afraid of offending a great soul. Factually, following Kṛṣṇa's desire to spread the sound throughout the universe, the cloud rumbles after the flute sound, mixing with it to make the flute sound louder. The cloud fears committing offense against Govardhan by expressing his joy, by covering the flute sound with his rumbling, since the flute sounds were supposed to give them joy. Last paragraph. The cloud fears committing offense to the flute, who is a great devotee. The cloud showers flowers very softly, mandam, on his friend. The cloud serves with his pleasant mental functions, sumanobihi, with his body by providing shade, and by his voice with soft rumbling. Our acharyas know how to relish topics of Kṛṣṇa. So the pattern that's described at the very beginning is followed here. The pattern is 2 verses, one speaking of the flute sound. Each of the verses, flute sound is front and center, and then how that flute sound is affecting different entities. And so there's the list goes on, one after the next, after the next. They're not in the forest, so how do they know how all these activities are going on in the forest? Maybe they have spies, maybe they have parrots that inform them, Kṛṣṇa does this and then Kṛṣṇa does that. Maybe they're omniscient. In any case, how they know, they're relishers of the ecstasy that others are feeling in relation to Kṛṣṇa's flute. They're not envious of them. They're appreciating their good fortune. And they're, as we heard yesterday, they're, as Uttama Bhaktas, they're seeing all living entities innately have love for Kṛṣṇa also. And by Kṛṣṇa's association, that love for Kṛṣṇa is being awakened. We, some other reference, it was Nectar Devotion reference. Chapter 17 from Nectar Devotion speaks something a little curious. I was discussing this last week. It speaks of Shukadeva Goswami being stimulated into ecstatic love, or the language used in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is Shanta Rati, directly by Paramatma. So what's all that about? Because we normally hear that bhakti is awakened by association with those who are carrying bhakti, right? Bhakti creates bhakti or awakens bhakti. But there's this Shanta Rati expression specifically, just a short, and then in Nectar Devotion and expanded a little bit in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, that Sanatana Goswami, within the womb of his mother, was experiencing Shanta Rati directly by the influence of Paramatma. And then after he left the womb of his mother, that Shanta Rati expanded. And then, through association with Vyasadeva and the message of Srimad Bhagavatam, it blossomed. So the Shanta Rati is one of the 5 rasas. Shanta Rati or Shanta Rasa. Specific, however, was in that Shanta, in his case in particular, is fascination with the impersonal feature, or Brahman feature. We're hearing here about clouds and other apparently, the word is being used, unconscious, but everything in the spiritual world is conscious, so how can it be unconscious? So even the clouds and whatever else, the land and whatever, the rocks and whatever else. But there's Shanta. It's paraphernalia for Krishna's pastimes. And paraphernalia for Krishna's pastimes are manifest by whom? Balaram, right? Paraphernalia for Krishna's pastimes are manifest by Balaram. Or one can say Sankarshan or Ananta or whatever. So they're conscious entities. But they're in this Shanta rasa stage. And then all it takes is Krishna's flute, and their Shanta rati is gone or has blossomed to another stage by association. In this case, it's direct association of Krishna's flute song. At least this is the Gopīs' understanding. So what the feelings of the cloud are, somehow they understand. The feelings and that the service rendered are this, that, and that, as we're hearing. But now going back to this chapter 17 text. Shanta rati is a stage of neutrality. Shanta. But there's conscious, but neutrality. And the teaching that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given us, which is the teaching of Srimad Bhagavatam, is that the platform of sadhana is to awaken the mood of service. Like, the chanting of Hare Krishna. What's the meaning? O energy of the Supreme Lord, please engage me in the service of Krishna. Or, in really short, please accept me. Accept means to render service. The whole teaching of Bhagavad Gita, the whole teaching of Bhagavatam, similarly, is going beyond this neutrality of cessation of material activity. I've been listening to Prabhupada speak on chapter 4 Bhagavad Gita, and it's like multiple times to multiple different audiences, expressing according to the audience the same thing. The process of sacrifice, starting with that, Brahmarpanam, Brahmahavir, Brahmagnau, Brahmanahutam, the process of sacrifice renders things to the spiritual plane by the process of sacrifice. And I learned this from somebody that's a Mayavadi, that in what's the ashram of Shankaracharya in South India? Say it louder. Sringeri Math. In Sringeri Math, before they eat, they recite that verse. Then they eat. Because it's the sacrifice, recognizing it's a sacrifice unto Brahman. So it's Brahman eating Brahman, I guess, or something like that. How they process that, I don't know. But the Prabhupada's point is sacrifice without engagement of the senses may lift one to the neutral stage, but one can't stay in the neutral stage without ananda, because it's our nature. So that Brahmananda is so minuscule that one after some time wants some activity and comes back down to the material plane for material activity. Even if one does successfully achieve that Brahman state, the Shantarati state. So the Shantarati, that's, let's just say, a Brahmavadi, like Sukadeva Goswami was, as we say, or the four Kumaras, as we say. They were Brahman realized souls from the get-go. Such personalities have already some inclining, some disposition towards serving. Because as soon as there's some touch of bhakti, and to whatever the degree is, from Shukadeva Goswami obviously to the highest stage. So here we have clouds. They're not like Shanta personalities. Shanta Rati, everything in the spiritual world, everything in Krishna Loka has some dimension of sweetness, because sweetness predominates. Sweetness is a term used by our acharyas again and again. The Madhurya feature, that sweetness, they have a natural, within them, a disposition towards the intimacy of being with Krishna. So one of the reasons why Krishna went to Vrindavan from Gokula was to enliven his devotees in Gokula, including the rivers and the trees and the birds and the thises and the that's. He wanted to enliven them. They wanted to have his association. Not the same, but some similarity to Krishna, to Ram going into the forest to give association to the sages and appear before them. And they were more than happy. They were ecstatic. Like Vishnu appearing before Dhruva. But in Vrindavan, even the clouds and even the cranes and even the this and the that's, they have this Madhurya disposition, even using their language unconscious, or even in the Shantarati stage, they're just sitting there as a rock or a cloud in the sky. But by association with Krishna, immediately they want to serve Krishna in whatever way that they can. Their sound, their shade, their good disposition. And the gopis are seeing this. Now, ordinary people can't see those things. The gopis aren't ordinary people. And then the concluding message is, if the cloud is feeling like this, then what to speak of the gopis, who are always, not just when Krishna comes by them and plays his flute, they're always mad after. Who can understand their exalted position? Who can understand? We're getting the description, and who can understand the description? Because it's beyond our experience, far, far beyond. But we're getting a picture, nonetheless, of, as we heard yesterday, the uttama position of these associates of Krishna in Vrindavan, particularly, especially the gopis. The cowherd boys, there's several places where it says, when they were with Krishna and Krishna was playing the flute, their reciprocation or response, their heart was moved to sing glories of Krishna while he's playing upon his flute, enlivening everybody. That's their response. I mean, there's not to say they didn't do any other things, but that was their response. And the gopis is just, they just go mad. And see how others are also going mad, stunned, crying, hair standing on end, rumbling, and so forth. Reaching with the rivers, reaching with their arms to capture some dust. Moving in like whirlpools, becoming maddened by the sound of Krishna's flute, becoming stunned. And then when some favorable breeze carries a particle of dust from Krishna's feet, they become immobile. I mean, this is how they're seeing the world. So you better watch out if you become a gopi. You might go mad. In social convention, most exalted. That's this chapter 35. So any comments and discussion on this elevated subject, Braja Prem?
Maharaj, I was just thinking that, so I'll start from here. So we are reading a section from Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 26, Kapila Dev's teachings. And there is this whole description of how the elements disintegrate, they come from Pradhan, and there is this mention that like sound is the first element that comes, and there is also the description of Brahma receiving the sound to be able to do his service from Krishna's flute. So, and then like today there is this whole description of like how the cloud and the flute and all of this are serving Krishna and bringing so much of joy. So I was just linking those two together to understand that like sound is so important, because through sound we can actually experience whatever little the experience might be, but to experience like how the spiritual world is and how what the gopis are experiencing, so my question is that like how can we actually develop?
How do you do what?
How do we develop?
How do you develop?
Yes. That very strong faith in the holy name, that like it has all the potencies, just like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu
It has all the
says.
what? Potencies?
Yeah. In it, the great conviction that the holy name is all there is, and that's the shelter that I have.
I got about 25% of what you said, but let me say back what I think you're asking. The experience of the residents of Vrindavan have been laid out for us, and it's all resting upon the sound of Krishna's flute, and how can we, through the sound of the holy name, come to the stage where we can experience Krishna like they're experiencing Krishna. Those aren't your words, but that's your question? Effort and mercy. A lot of effort and a lot of mercy. Something that going back in some of the earlier sections that we've discussed, the acharyas make this point repeatedly clear. The intensity, the question Prahlāda asked yesterday evening about the distinction between Nanda, Jasoda, and Vasudeva and Devaki. And our acharyas speak about the intensity, big letters, intensity of affection for Krishna and focus upon Krishna in a certain mood. That results in reciprocation from Krishna's side with them. And so the effort has everything to do with intensity of effort, the how-to question. It's so whatever we're doing, it's inadequate, and we want to notch it up. And it's not just quantity versus quality or that kind of thing. It's Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says the essence of overcoming the impurities of heart is the intention to do so. And we'll just put an adjective, the intensity of intention to do so. And depending upon the intensity of intention, then we'll progress more or less. And the intention is bhakti, that Krishna is to be pleased, not, it's crazy here, let me get out, but to please Krishna. It's certainly crazy here, but to please Krishna. And the intensity of the intention. Okay? And lots of mercy. And the mercy of Krishna comes through the merciful associates of Krishna, they're eager to bestow, and we have to be eager to receive from those who are eager to bestow. I mean, gosh, look at what they're doing here, our acharyas. So, is that anything more?
Yeah. Maharaj, I have a question from yesterday's class.
Yesterday's class.
Yeah. So, there is this description that said that because we have turned ourselves away from Krishna, we are not able to experience the joy of, or we are experiencing misery, let me put it that way. So it's the false ego that is actually blocking us to experience the happiness of doing service to Krishna. Is that the correct understanding, that it's the covering of the false ego that is not letting us to...
Yeah, there's different... If I've understood your question correctly, you're asking, what is it that blocks us from experiencing the happiness, the joy of serving Krishna directly? Like deity worship, for example. There's varieties of coverings. False ego has, got a big role, but there are other ways of describing besides that one. Anartha is a big, from Bhakti Sandarbha, it's a big obstacle blocking our direct experience of Krishna, which is by nature joyful. The metaphor that he uses, it doesn't specify false ego, he specifies anarthas. So perhaps you can make a connection between how do anarthas arise and false ego. So you can look at it in terms of false ego, you look at it in terms of anarthas. Or there are other ways, our own Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moha, Mada, Matsarja, our own false attachments to trying to be the enjoyer, and that come out in very detrimental ways, completely foreign to the soul. And those dispositions of heart, once we have them, they're very hard to overcome. And we have them to different degrees. So that's the obstacle. So your question specifically, if I heard it correctly, is false ego the number one culprit? That's one way of analyzing, and there's other ways of analyzing. So now what?
I have a follow-up. So
Okay.
we were having this discussion in our Bhagavatam group, and like one devotee was asking, like, how does the false ego look like? Is it like a cloud, or what is it made of? That is,
What does it look like?
yeah, like what is it made of? Like, how do
Scary.
we understand it?
What does it look like? I mean, how do you find it? How do you like laser point? There it is. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, more so to understand that what does it do to the soul, that the soul is completely forgetful of its real identity, so the covering of the false ego, so like actually what happens?
I didn't get it. Could you get it? Just the last part.
What does it mean that false ego? What does it mean that false ego covers the soul? What does it mean? Because we don't know what false ego
That's your question.
looks like, I guess.
What does it look like that the false ego covers the soul? A visual picture, what does it look like? For me, is even before we get bodies, the primordial act of procreation, where Mahavishnu's glance carries the living entities in time energy to pradhan. And it agitates that impregnation. Pradhan is now impregnated with living entities. And by that agitation of time in the living entities, pradhan starts to separate out. And the first element that separates out is false ego. It's contact, the living entities' contact with Prakriti. They become covered. Even before there's, like, even the other elements, it's just false ego. And then false ego in conjunction with the modes of nature, different other elements separate out. So there's living entity, and clinging to the living entity is this false ego. Before we even do anything, before we have any instruments to do things with. So what does it look like? It looks like, a big problem. It looks something like Prabhupada's description of distilled water. Water, by the power of the sun, is evaporated. And it forms in clouds and it comes down. It's distilled water, but as soon as it touches earth, it becomes muddy, contaminated. So living entity in touch with Prakriti, what does it look like? Looks like muddy water. But water's not muddy. It's the earthy elements, etc., clinging to or mixing with the water. So that's what it's just part of our material sojourn, is having false ego. And it may seem impossible to overcome it, and other than the bhakti process or becoming, because there are scriptural references in the Bhagavatam that say one can become free from false ego and the rest of the subtle body by other processes and become situated in Brahman, but you can't stay there because the real Ananda that we're hankering for is not experienced, and so one comes back again. And then there you are again, the distilled water falling down as rain. False ego, before you even do anything. So the proper process is the bhakti process. So the bhakti process has the power to dissolve the subtle body. So the essence of the bhakti process is wanting to please Kṛṣṇa. So false ego is that which is, going the opposite direction. Separate enjoyment from Kṛṣṇa. That's false ego. We want to enjoy ananda. It's our nature. There's nothing wrong with wanting to enjoy. Wanting to enjoy separate from Kṛṣṇa, that's the difficulty. And it's manifest, it's embodied within false ego, and false ego covers the soul. So consciousness is filtered, just like these light fixtures. They have some kind of, whatever the right word is, translucent glass or tinted glass, so it comes out a certain way. And it's different than the lights that are on the altar over there, etc., etc. But the light is pure, and then there's something that modifies that light that's pure. So false ego is something that modifies what real happiness is. Back to your question about joy, it modifies it. It just distorts it, and we don't get the real thing. We take the something else for being the real thing because that's all we know. Okay? Whew. Tough question. Good question. Anyone else? Discussion?
Should I do online questions? So, Sri Radhika is asking, the most exalted devotee, Uddhava, prays to become a devotee in the Shantarati by becoming a blade of grass in Vrindavan. Even though in the Shantarati...
Even though what?
Even though in Shantarati...
Even though...
In this Shantarati
in
state...
Shantarasa...
One cannot actively serve. Is the intimacy just as rewarding?
Yeah. He wants the dust, and once he gets the dust, look out. It's no longer Shantarati.
Did I understand correctly that an entity in Shantarati gets enlivened by some bhakti stimulus and then comes to another rasa to actively serve?
Yeah, that's my understanding. And in the classic is Shukadeva Goswami. Go ahead.
Uttama Bhakta, how important is it to firmly and genuinely believe that I have no devotion to make progress?
Well, no devotion, that's not even a correct statement. Paucity of devotion, okay. But the soul has devotion. It's innate within the soul. Krishna prema is innate within the soul. If you deny what your spiritual nature is, you've misunderstood the philosophy.
And he continues, how to stay on that path, although there is seemingly some progress?
Well, Krishna's mercy. That's how you stay on the path. I want more of Krishna's mercy. A nice image I like is the rivers, when a favorable breeze carries some dust from Krishna's feet, they're in ecstasy and that they want more, they want more. So be eager. That's what our topic is going to be Friday morning. Eagerness. It's the theme of the festival of the Holy Name. Go ahead.
Radha Vallabha is asking, Anartha Nivritti process is typically gradual process as part of purification.
As far as purification?
Yes.
Yes.
So how do we move from state of awareness of our limitation to position on focus on pure sound vibration and loving reciprocation of lordships and devotees?
Now this is the how-to question again. He can ask, she'll give him the answer. Maybe he sent that in at the beginning before she asked her question, but that it has been answered.
Yes.
Okay?
That's it, Maharaj.
Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki?
Jai.
Jai.